Alright, so to get started, I actually want to model it up first in Fusion 360. So in the process of doing that, I actually created three different renditions of the same desk. The first two were just garbage, they were so bad, but this is the one I landed on, and I really like it. So after exporting a parts list and some plans, I got to cutting.
I came from the mud. There's dirt on my hands. Strong like a tree. There's roots where I stand. Oh, I've been running from the law. Hope they won't shoot me down soon. Catch me howling at the moon.
After finishing up drilling these pocket holes, I started assembling the side pieces. And a problem I actually ran into here was that the 2x2s, which are actually 1.5 by 1.5, are not exactly twice the thickness of 3/4 inch plywood. I should have seen it coming because, 3/4 inch plywood isn't actually 3/4 of an inch. So because of that, the plywood is actually not completely level with those 2x2s on the end. So that came with a slew of problems when trying to install the door slides later, but it also did just kind of change the measurements of everything else just by a hair.
Will you find me? Hope you find me. I'll be back home soon. When the sun rises, when the sun
It was at this point that I realized that this piece was actually way too long. Just looking at it looked a bit off, so I measured it. It turns out it was 20.5 inches, and I cut it there because I actually made the plans wrong. Instead of being 20.5, it needed to be 19. So went ahead, cut that, and then re-drilled the pocket holes.
Running from the law. Hope they won't shoot me down soon. They sing on a sleepless night. Try to catch me howling at the moon.
This is another one of those problems I was talking about earlier as a result of the plywood not actually being 3/4 of an inch. Because of that, it wasn't flush with the 2x2s, and so these 1x2s that are glued on top were actually just proud a little bit. So I had to do a lot of planing to get those to be flush with the 2x2s on the side. That way when I go to paint it, it actually accepts the coat and it can actually look like one just shaker style panel for the side of the desk. And there comes that point during every project, about halfway through, that you finally look up from what you've been working on and realize that your shop's just a mess. So you gotta take a time and just clean it so you can actually think.
Up to my chin, won't stop fighting to the very end. Many men try to reach it, many men have failed. Well, if you wanna get to heaven, you gotta raise a little hell. And I've been running from the law. Hope they won't shoot me down.
Now this is the part I really was kicking myself over, because you can see right here how I had actually cut the desktop almost in half, and that happened as a result of me thinking that the desktop was the scrap piece of wood, and every time I look at it, it just drives me a little bit crazy every single time. But after painting that, I was able to get that to go away. Now this is also one of my favorite processes here, is edge banding, because you can take some pretty cheap plywood and make it look like solid wood, and I think it adds so much value to an overall piece. So applying this was a huge step towards finishing it. It was pretty satisfying.
Try to catch me howling at the moon. Up to my chin, won't stop fighting to the very end. Many men try to reach it, many men have failed. Well, if you wanna get to heaven, you gotta raise a little hell. And I've been running from the law.
So as you can see, now I'm installing the drawer slides, and I don't have any of those fancy jigs that you can clamp to the edges and then rest the drawer slides on. So what I did was actually just turn it on its back and installed them vertically. This worked out pretty well. But this is actually the first time I've made drawers, so it's probably not the best technique, but it worked out in the end pretty darn well. And for the actual drawer slides, I decided to use this pretty cheap 1/2-inch plywood, so you can see it's pretty bowed. But after nailing it and gluing it, it all straightened out and the drawers opened perfectly. Now in assembling these drawers, all I had on hand was a 16 gauge finish nailer, and I also only had 2-inch long nails. So I had to use these super large and super long nails on 1/2-inch plywood, and it was super susceptible to blowout. But if you nailed right in the center, it didn't, and it's pretty darn strong because of it, I'd say. So it worked out in the end, but I had to hammer out quite a few nails that blew out the sides. Now for the moment of truth. Fits like a glove. So I'm gonna move on here to installing the false door panels. What do you call those? False door panels? Faux door panels? I don't know. The door panels. To make them look like actual drawers. And I ran into some alignment issues here. And that's mainly just because during cutting I didn't cut them quite perfect when I was assembling the drawers. So because of that, I had to actually spend a bit of time sanding the back of the false drawer fronts just in order to make it so that they can actually sit flush with either side on the 2x2s there. What I did really like about making this, especially with the drawers, is that I got to use my table saw more. The table saw has always been a tool that is extremely useful when you need it, but I tend to migrate towards a circular saw just because I've used it so much more, feel more comfortable with it. But I'm trying to switch over to the table saw because you can make such more accurate work.
Oh, I've been running from the law. Hope they won't shoot me down soon. They sing on a sleepless night. Try to catch me howling at the moon. Won't stop fighting to the very end. Many men try to reach it, many men have failed. Well, if you wanna get to heaven, you gotta raise a little hell. And I've been running from the law. Hope they won't shoot me down soon.
So at this point, I finished up building it, and obviously I moved on to painting. So all in all, I actually did about 2 coats of paint on the whole desk, but an extra 3rd coat of paint just on the top, just to make that a little bit thicker, because for one, it's going to be used quite a bit, but also with that line right there where the 2 pieces are joined together, I really wanted to make sure that I can cover that up. And so you can still see it a little bit right now because it's wet, but once it dried and then I sprayed the lacquer on, it almost entirely disappeared. So thankfully that was a mistake that I could cover up. So now I move on to spraying the lacquer, and just like the paint, I did 2 coats of lacquer on the whole desk in both of the drawers, and then an additional coat just on the top. Now it's time for the best part. Now that the desk is completely finished, it's painted, it's built, clear coated, time to put it all back together, throw the hardware on, and then set it up.
Try to catch me howling at the moon.